Welcome to Better Health Guy Blogcasts, empowering your better health. And now, here's Scott, your Better Health Guy. The content of this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Nothing in today's discussion is meant to serve as medical advice or as information to facilitate self-treatment. As always, please discuss any potential health-related decisions with your own personal medical authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 117 of the Better Health Guy blogcast series. Today's guest is Dr. Q Collins, and the topic of the show is Deuterium Depletion. Dr. Q Collins is a leading scientist when it comes to developing and applying nutritional and metabolic therapies to treat cancer in people and pets. He holds a PhD in Clinical Immunology and an MS in Oncotherapeutics, an MA in Experimental Pathology, and a BS in Poverty Healthcare and Cancer Epidemiology. He is the Co-Founder and Principal Investigator at Cignature Health Metabolic Clinic, now known as the Center for Deuterium Depletion. This is the first clinic in the world to use deuterium and tracer technologies to describe and follow the health status of patients with metabolic disorders such as cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune disorders. He is the principal investigator at Epigenix Foundation. This not-for-profit organization created by the founders of Quest Nutrition promotes research to prevent and ameliorate diseases, maximize quality of life, and/or improve personal performance. He is also the co-founder and principal investigator at Ketopet Sanctuary. The sanctuary is a 53-acre ranch outside Austin, Texas, that uses the ketogenic diet and other metabolic therapies with and without standard of care to treat dogs with naturally occurring cancers. And now my interview with Dr. Q Collins. This is a topic that I've wanted to do for some time to both learn more personally and also to share with our listeners, deuterium depletion. Thanks so much for being here today, Dr. Q.
And thanks for inviting me, Scott. This is really just super.
I'm excited as well. Tell us a little about how you got into doing the important work that you do today. Did you have some personal health journey that was the catalyst for your passion and purpose now?
Well, it is a journey, and it's actually funny. I received my degree for clinical immunology, 30 years ago. And going along through life, doing everything that everybody does, being in pharmaceutical companies, doing a lot of research, building hospitals, starting hospitals, running hospitals. And along the way, I lost my daughter and my wife to cancer. During that time, that fight, you really start to understand a lot of the things I believed in as far as allopathic medicine, and the drugs that I helped make couldn't cure them, couldn't save them. So my daughter was a person that actually introduced me to the ketogenic diet, but she was so afraid to tell me about it that I really didn't find out about it till after she had passed. And I started searching for recipes and found her name on recipes on the internet. It was just terrible. But I still didn't believe in it then. Then my wife developed, 3-4 years later, developed a brain tumor. And after calling all the friends in the world that we will to help with all the things, I was at the NIH, I worked at the FDA. So I had great friends, a lot that are in the news today dealing with COVID. And so what happened there is we found out there was no treatment for glioblastomas. My wife reintroduced me to the ketogenic diet. I told her she was crazy. She, of course, overruled that. And I'd have started using the ketogenic diet, cooking for a person that couldn't cook. I was a well taken care of man. So she did everything. So I had to learn to cook. But the ketogenic diet was so fantastic because it's about science. And so I started using that. It was really rather new. And I started changing it where it's therapeutic. I started a dog clinical trial to see how it worked in dogs, worked with Dominic and Tom and Adrian and everybody in the field, met them. And I would take everything that they did, put it into my wife, and then keep going. And she lived a couple of years. She was given 5 weeks to live. She lived about 2 years.
Wow.
Past that. And if we know today, she would still be with us. Then what happened was, after she passed away, I started working for Quest Nutrition, who bought me out to Los Angeles to start what we call the Ketopet Sanctuary. So I developed that, and we started doing the same thing for dogs, using all those ketogenic diets, this strange thing called deuterium depleted water, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, everything I would use for a person. They did in dogs first to tell me then to fund clinical trials in people. And so I was so lucky and fortunate with them. They became actually $1 billion company, and they used all their money freely for what we did an incredible job. And we even did a lot of semi-clinical trials. I say they're semi. We work with hospitals such as Johns Hopkins, the Burroughs Institute, Cedars-Sinai, UCLA, a lot of different hospitals, informally with their patients using the ketogenic diet. And it went great. So I'm one of the grandfathers of the therapeutic ketogenic diet. Then fast forward 2 years later, we discovered deuterium depletion and what deuterium depletion was. And so that met with ketogenic diet brought us to founding the Center for Deuterium Depletion, and that's how we got here.
Wow. So your pain really has become your purpose and your passion. That's quite a journey that you've been through to get to where you are today. If we're going to talk about deuterium, talk to us a little about what hydrogen is and why hydrogen is important for health.
So hydrogen is the first element that was made. The big engineer, God, whoever it is, that's what we started with. And so as you think about hydrogen, there was hydrogen, tritium, and deuterium. Those are all isotopes of what we call hydrogen. Hydrogen's really protium, tritium, and deuterium, 1, 2, and 3. Before Earth was here, they existed by themselves in the ether. You know, you can read the Bible, and that's really what it's talking about when it's talking about Genesis and the Big Bang, as a history book or as a religious book, however you want to take it. But that Big Bang was that separation of deuterium, hydrogen, tritium, which burst apart and really is sent out from where it begins to make all the planets and moons and everything else. And everything from hydrogen, right, which has the simplest, smallest thing, a molecular weight of 1, it started to collide with each other, make more and more and more and more things to where it makes gold and aluminum. They always are based on hydrogen first, adding to other elements to make all the things that we are and all the things that can exist. Deuterium was the next thing that came about. It's just hydrogen with this extra neutron on it. And that extra neutron has no charge, but it has weight. So it starts to make something twice as heavy. That's deuterium. Tritium doesn't exist on this planet naturally anymore. It's something you have to make. And that's the thing we use to make bombs. And nuclear bombs are made of tritium. And it's always like to say you have 3 hydrogens, one that's healthy, one that will give you disease, and one that will just give you a bomb. So that's the way to think about it.
Nice. So deuterium we also then call heavy hydrogen. Is heavy hydrogen something that is created? In other words, does hydrogen become deuterium or heavy hydrogen, or does that not actually happen?
No, we don't. That doesn't happen anymore where we are. It may be in some place far away where they're starting a new universe, yes. But all the hydrogens and deuteriums exist now that it is here, right? Energy doesn't change, it just takes different forms. And
why do you think the deuterium issue in terms of our health is more common now than, let's say, 100 years ago? Is it just that we have more awareness, or are there certain environmental or industrial factors that expose us to more deuterium?
So let's even talk about more than 100 years, and then we'll talk about the 100 years too. Really, when you look at deuterium and hydrogen deuterium's heavier. So since it's heavier, and it also has what we call isotopic properties. So a hydrogen and a deuterium, although they're both hydrogens, they act differently. They have different boiling points. They have different freezing points. They have different floating points. So just like if you have a rock and you put it on water, it will go down to the bottom of water. And if you have wood, it will float. Think of deuterium and hydrogen like that. Deuterium is just heavy. That's why you call it heavy hydrogen. So So they naturally exist. And what has happened in the planet, when it's cold, the freezing point of deuterium is lower. So it's lower. So when it was colder during the ice ages, all deuterium was frozen, kept in icebergs and in snow and all. And so the protein levels, the regular hydrogen levels, were higher, and therefore things were healthier. They could grow bigger. Could grow bigger. They were healthier. Their ATPs were going crazy, and everything was going hunky-dory. As we've had the ice age start to melt and it gets warmer, a lot of that deuterium starts to be released from those cold places. Okay? Now, what has happened? So it's a natural phenomenon that just happens. And we've had freeze and thaws a gazillion times on this planet. So, but what has happened the last 100 years is man has entered this whole thing. And what we've done instead now is bring into being agriculture. And this agriculture, and also synthetic products of making different foods. And these foods and products that we use put hydrogens on things to make a food, or put hydrogens on things to make a pesticide. And so all these man-made chemicals, because they make them with hydrogens, they make them from tap water, they have deuterium on them. Therefore, they're introducing deuterium into our diets, into the foods, into our grasses, into everything. So it's so much more ubiquitous in our lives. Combining that with our poor lifestyles, us not getting out, getting light anymore, not breathing properly, not exercising properly, all those things that we all know these things, but that combining with high levels of deuterium have caused us not to be able to deplete deuterium on our own anymore, and therefore it's more in our bodies, and that's where we get more disease and chronic illness, not only in us, but in the insects and trees. Not only are we sick, so is the planet, because there's just too much deuterium.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like it ties in to some extent to global warming, and it also ties into the glyphosate conversation from a pesticide perspective. So this environmental toxic soup that we live in. Are we born with elevated deuterium levels, or does it take environmental exposures over time to lead to higher levels? Do we see deuterium levels in conditions, let's say in younger children with autism, for example?
So yes, don't think of deuterium as a toxin. I think it's a natural thing. There are toxic levels of it. I think that's the best way to say it. Just like there are toxic levels of oxygen and there are toxic levels of apple pie. So if you look at this, the question of neonate, or when we're prenatal, when we're babies, it used to be, I would say, that you need deuterium in your body to grow. That's important, because what deuterium does, it gets into your DNA, keeps your DNA open, and allows you to replicate. The great thing about that is your body is able to do certain things at certain stages of your life. So your body is different when you're minus 5 months old than it is when you're 5 years old or 10-year-old, because different systems start to come on and work. Your hormones, so all these things are related, and so it's all about timing. So yes, at one time I would say that in the state of a baby that it didn't matter, but that's changing now, even because as the mother starts to has more deuterium in her, she's passing it on to her child, who's eating that deuterium, because they're feeding off what the nutrition that the mother provides. And so even that baby starts to get too much deuterium, and that's why you're seeing this increase in children that are born with what we used to call chronic diseases, whether that be diabetes, juvenile diabetes, or infant diabetes, or cancer, acute lymphocytic leukemia with babies, all these things, or even, my God, infections, a baby born with Lyme disease. This happens, and it happens all the time. But it really, when it comes down to it, it's fundamentally this increase of deuterium that's allowing all these things, either allowing or causing them to happen.
That's such a powerful statement for me, having myself had Lyme disease for many, many years and been invalidated over and over and over with all these concepts. And in fact, it's still in conventional medicine not accepted that a child can be born with Lyme disease. And I love how you just put that out there like it was fact. Beautiful. So let's then talk a little bit about some of the modern conditions where deuterium plays a significant role. What are some of the symptoms that people might experience that might lead us to think about elevated deuterium?
Okay, here's what I want you to think about. And this is no longer theory or conjecture. We've printed over 100 papers, and there are now a lot of different labs and people are out there, since they can make money on it, that are out there now studying this. So again, when I talk about hydrogen, just think of it being fundamental to everything. It is what makes you. You are 68% hydrogen, just like the world is 68% hydrogen when we think of water. So when we start to change those hydrogens, if you think of structures and you build a house and you use all the same screws and nuts, they have to be a certain way to fit together to make that house look like the house you wanted it to. Once you start to change those screws and those nuts and add something that's twice as big, that house that you imagined when you're finished ends up looking like a dog or a car or a horse. It's not a house anymore. So when you think about that, take it down to the next level and think about it in terms of health. So if your health requires you to look a certain way, to be built a certain way, to act a certain way, and you change those ways, or the way you're built, the way you're able to act, the way your enzymes work, the way your mind thinks, then that is what we call being unhealthy. And then we start to see disease pop up from that. So what do you see? We start to see things like obesity starting to increase. Why? Because your metabolism slows down, because you can't process sugars, because your insulin has deuterium in it, your sugars have deuterium in it, your pancreas is now made with deuterium. And those things now don't work the way they're supposed to work in the place that you live. Then you start to see diabetes. You start to see ticks that now carry a bacteria that they never carried before because they become in contact with them. And even those ticks, biological systems are changed by the deuterium that's there, because when they feed on something, they eat more deuterium. So it's just so involved that you can now start to say, why? Because even when we talk about COVID, which we're working on very hard, COVID is really I've heard people talk about 5G, and I've heard people talk about all these things. That's all true, but all those things are not important if your deuterium levels are low, and those things can't hurt you.
Very interesting. Many of my listeners are dealing with chronic Lyme disease or pathogen-associated chronic conditions. Is there a connection between deuterium and pathogens? And does depleting deuterium make the internal environment or terrain less hospitable to these microbial overgrowths?
So the answer is yes. We've had a number of chronically sick and Lyme's patients. It's often hard. They're in that same area because depending on what doctor you go to, they will tell you have chronic fatigue. Some people will say it's Lyme disease, but they are the same. They're in the same sphere. So yes, it requires for all these parasites to live. Bacteria, whether it's a bacteria or a worm or a fungi, they require high levels of deuterium. Not high, they're the opposite of us. They require the bad stuff to grow. And that's the reason they grow so fast. They grow fast because they use deuterium. Now, we've done plenty of experiments and published to where we've taken, to prove this, we've taken the same media and grown fungi or bacteria in deuterium depleted media, and we see those bacteria can't grow. We can we can see the same things where we can use a light source, photobiomodulation, on the bacteria, and it's not effective. But if we drop the deuterium levels, it is effective. So we always like to coin the term. We've we've done so much and progressed so much that really what we do is deuterium depletion biomodulation. That's really what we do too. And at the standpoint of the immune system and everything else. So yes, it is very, very effective for a Lyme's patient, except it's just the one part of the whole puzzle. You can't recover from Lyme's. It's more difficult to recover from Lyme's or any other chronic illness if you don't fix your deuterium levels first. You can't supplement your way to it, but it's like playing whack-a-mole. You haven't fixed the problem, but you fix the symptoms.
So we know then that the level of deuterium can correlate with unwellness or dis-ease, reducing it, potentially leading to a higher state of wellness. How commonly does depleting deuterium positively affect people clinically, lead them to higher ground, reduce their symptoms?
100% of the time. It's that simple. Now, that's different from saying it's going to cure everybody with cancer. I can't say that. But what I can say, it gives you a higher quality of life. You feel better. You have less fatigue, no matter what disease this is, as disease. I love how you said that. Because what it does, it gives you more energy. It gives you more vitality. So it makes you a more powerful being to fight that disease that you have.
You've once said that deuterium depletion is the basis for all of functional medicine. Tell us a little about what you mean by that.
Well, I love functional medicine, and one of our clinical director and founder, Dr. Ann Cooper, is an expert in functional medicine. And I always liked that. I always found it amusing with the term because everybody does functional medicine, they just don't know it. But here's the problem that we have. When you look at functional medicine, what we're going to do is take a set of labs and that were based on thousands of different reports that we got on people that are healthy and people that are diseased. And then we're going to look at all the things from vitamin D to the way they breathe to all these different things, levels that we have found to be important from looking at clinical studies that say vitamin D levels are higher, you're healthier. So, but the biggest problem is all of that data is based on a sick population. Because everybody, if your deuterium levels are high, you're sick. You just don't know it, and that's why I like to say it's like it's like being the tallest person among a bunch of short people. You're still short. You just don't know it. So what I say is being fundamental to all functional medicine is if we were to deuterium deplete those people, what we will end up seeing is all of those labs that we took change by themselves without anything that you do or add. So it brings it down to baseline toward what I like to say is a healthy baseline. Then from there, functional medicine works because then you can see what the body is actually doing because it's absorbing its nutrients better. There's more energy for it to react and heal itself better. You sleep better. You breathe better. All of those basic fundamental things are now turned toward being more natural and more supportive. And now functional medicine can work. So that's what I mean by that.
Tell us a little bit about the connection between hydrogen and our ability to produce ATP or energy within our mitochondria. And then what happens when that hydrogen is in the form of heavy hydrogen or deuterium?
Okay, this is so great. Thanks for that question. Because again, I try to make this very simple and it's taken so long to get to simplicity, and I apologize for that. But it's really easy when you think about your mitochondria. Everybody knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. We all know that from high school. But the way it works is just been recently really elucidated. So within our mitochondria, which happens to have thousands and thousands of these tiny little engines called nanomotors, and these nanomotors turn like a turbine engine. Just think of it like making electricity. They turn, they turn, they turn. And as they turn, they make your ATP. And they make your ATP, and that's your energy, ATP. So they make all these things. And this is something that happens inside your mitochondria. So we know we have food that we use to make power, just like gas. That's like a car uses gas, we use food. What our body does, it breaks down that food and strips the hydrogens off of it. And it strips that hydrogen, it makes a river or ocean of hydrogens that flow to these nanomotors and take these nanomotors and make them make ATP. So as it flows past like a water, these hydrogens turn the engine and these nanomotors are made. We have more nanomotors in our body. Now I want everybody to think about this. We have more nanomotors in our body than there are stars and planets in the whole universe. Think about that. It's phenomenal. Once you understand how complex and how complex and powerful you are, you should have such gratitude to understand that you're a powered individual and you have power. More in our body than all the stars and the planets. And so we're able to make from that 2.5 pounds of food we eat a day, 2.5 pounds of food, we're able to make almost 60 pounds of energy. Think about that. 3 pounds in, 60 pounds of energy out. That 60 pounds of energy is used to do everything in our body, everything from thinking to walking to exercising, everything. That's what's important. And so we get this from our food. So eating properly is important. Now, when that food has instead these heavy hydrogens on it, it strips it off, and think about these tiny, delicate little engines in your mitochondria. Now you're hitting it with hydrogens that are twice as heavy. What happens? It's like having a Ferrari engine, right? Because these things are turning 7,000 to 9,000 revolutions per minute, faster than a Maserati, faster than a Ferrari, fast. Jet engines are just slightly faster than our mitochondria. That big element hits those tiny nanomotors and breaks them. Once you break that nanomotor, it can't make ATP. It doesn't slow it down, it breaks it. And so now you have a broken nanomotor, and you can't fix it. You've got to rebuild it with more protein. You got to make a new one. So not only does it hit one, but then it hits another one. It hits another one. So think about, I just said, if you looked up in the sky and your body's all stars, if you looked up in the sky right now and 10% of the stars disappeared, you'd be scared as hell. Well, that's what goes on with your body. When you start eating high levels of deuterium, you're killing your stars. And so it's the same thing.
Wow. That's a great analogy for us to understand how critical, and to think that we have Maseratis inside of us. That's pretty good too. What's the impact of deuterium in conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalitis, or these fatiguing illnesses? Have we compared groups of people with CFSME to healthy controls, and can we then see that their deuterium levels are significantly higher?
Yeah, we probably 10 to 15% of our patients or higher, because that's Dr. Cooper's side. I'm mostly deal with cancer patients, deals with the chronic fatigue. The answer is absolutely yes. Chronic fatigue is a disease of deuterium. And we can say that very easily because all we simply do is lower the deuterium levels and they're better. Now, we don't want them on a supplement. We call deuterium, even deuterium depleted water is a supplement. So what we do is then try to fix the systems that are broken in them. And what are those systems? Those systems are the way they breathe. It is the way they eat. It is the way they sleep. It is the anxiety that they have, because even anxiety and that thought, really what we do is provide 4 things, and all of our treatments and therapies are to make you more resilient in 4 areas: emotionally, cognitively, physically, and socially. Those are the 4 things that make a person and makes a person's life whole. And in chronic fatigue and in most other diseases, some of those things are starting to be destroyed. And so we go about looking at a patient, and each patient's individual, and we go through of seeing what's broken in you, not what's wrong with you, because there's nothing wrong with any patient. They're simply broken. So how can we fix the things that's broken? And then we go about finding out at the end of the day, after we go through all this therapy, what can't be fixed. And then when we find out what can't be fixed, we can design therapies, lifelong therapies, around them being able to get around what they can't do.
Let's talk a little bit about testing for deuterium. So talk to us about the D-terminator testing in terms of breath and saliva. How is that test performed, and what kinds of information does it tell us?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that. The Determinator test, we've been doing the deuterium depletion in therapies it's 30, 40 years old. But not until 4 years ago did we invent a test to actually look at deuterium inside the body. Think about that. In the history of man, no one was able to actually see what was inside you. Without being post-mortem. I think it cuts you open, but that's not very comfortable. So really, we have a determinator test, and the determinator test does two things. It measures the amount of deuterium that's in your breath, and the deuterium in your breath is really coming from 50% of it's coming from your heart and lungs, and so they act as markers for deuterium that's in your tissue. And then we can measure deuterium levels that are in your saliva, urine, or blood, or serum, all of the liquidy parts, and we like to call it the biofluids. And so, for instance, if it's done for saliva or urine, we call that a marker for biofluids. Now, that doesn't mean it's the same in all biofluids or in same organs, but it means that they're markers for it. And then if we measure the difference between what's in your tissues and what's in your saliva, we can measure how much you're able to deplete deuterium, because your organs take everything what happens at nighttime and during the day. You're taking deuterium out of your organs and it's dumping it to this pool of water that's around you. Just think of it like taking something and dumping it to the river, like chemical companies getting rid of toxins into the water. That's really what's happening in this case too. As you get sick or as we change our lifestyle, our ability to deplete, our ability to have a big difference between what's in our tissue and what's in our bowel fluids goes down. And as that goes down, you can start, as everybody knows, the closer it gets, you can get this back channeling to where it starts to get into your cells. Another important thing that's really amazing that people don't realize, 10% of our mitochondria, about 1 to 10% of mitochondria actually float around in our blood. They're free. They're not inside cells. This is relatively new information that probably within the last 2 years that people have picked up on, and something we've been studying for years. I did this for my graduate thesis, was to look at floating mitochondria. So to look at these mitochondria are floating around in that cesspool of deuterium in your blood and your serum. So if your levels of deuterium are lower, these floating mitochondria, which must be there for a reason, are able to make more energy and do what they're supposed to do. And we're finding one of the big things that these mitochondria do is control our immune system, because they allow beneficial beneficial ROS oxidation to be there, and that's what this is beneficial, not the ones when we think about, it's bad. It's not. It's something that controls the way things work. And these happen to look like they gate the way our innate immune system works. That's the immune system that we have that is primordial, that's been around forever, that protects us from everything like bacteria so it doesn't get into us. So that's a reason that we need to help those floating mitochondria.
So you're talking there about oxidants that the immune system uses to deal with a particular pathogen, which is also why taking lots of antioxidants may not necessarily be a good thing in people that have chronic infections, because you're essentially blunting that immune response in some ways, correct?
That is correct. And I thank you for that, because again, especially for cancer patients, don't do that, because you don't want to do it, because actually cancer cells use it to their advantage. So yes, there are so many different things. Biohackers are fantastic. They're healthy people, and they can do a lot of things that people with chronic illnesses shouldn't do. And so I want everybody out there to remember that you need to do something different, because we want to fix the things that are broken. They're trying to optimize what's fixed already.
So with this determinator testing, what we want to see then is that the levels of deuterium in the saliva or urine are higher than what we're getting from the breath, because then that's showing that we're essentially able to get rid of the deuterium in our tissues, correct?
That's correct. And
Okay.
what's important about that we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of people now, and we're getting a better understanding. Remember, I said that really what we do is deuterium depletion biomodulation. And so originally we knew that difference was important, but now we can even look further and see, just like when you use light or drugs or anything else, you need the appropriate amount of deuterium, the ratio of hydrogen to make different things happen. And so we look at those differences in deuterium levels to get you in the zone that's right for the thing that you need to do. So you just simply don't want to drink. A lot of people do deuterium depleted water willy-nilly, because that may not be the thing that you need, and it may actually be something that could hurt you. We don't know for sure, but if it works that way for every single other thing, it's got to work that way for deuterium depleted water too.
So with the determinator testing, what's the kind of range of results that you see? What's the average score? What do you consider to be elevated? What do you consider to be a healthy level?
So it's again, great questions. So if you look, what we will say definitely is when we see deuterium levels above 150, and so the highest level of deuterium you're going to find, the higher levels, it's going to be what we call in seawater, and it's 155 parts per million. That's the high part, okay? And then you're going to usually see in river waters these days, you're going to see in river waters 145, 146, okay? And those kind of things, rainwater, depending on where you are. If you're at the top of a mountain, the deuterium levels are lower, so it can be in the 130s. And if you're in a valley or low, or in California where we are, the deuterium levels are higher because the atmosphere has the water from the sea in it. So our water is about 151. So what we see in different people. So we see, again, when we see 150 above and we see them not being able to deplete, then we tell them they need to go to their doctor because they have a chronic illness, or they're going to see one soon, even if they feel healthy. When that range in between in the 140s is naturally what we see most people at, but we also see that because most people don't don't have a very good diet. And so if we straighten their diet, we start to see it in the low 140s into the 139s, right? I mean, down to 139s. That may not sound like a lot from 150 to 139, but it's huge because you got to think about, you literally have billions and trillions of hydrogens in your body. So it's a lot that's there. And it only takes a few. It's almost like having terrorists. It doesn't take a lot of terrorists. It only takes a few well-placed terrorists to kill a lot of people, or to kill your mitochondria in this case. So those are the levels. And what we see in athletes who we tone up and get everything perfect, we can see them naturally walking around during basketball and football season with deuterium levels, with the deuterium levels in their tissues in the 80s. You know, our Olympic athletes that we work with. So they're in the 80s and they deplete. I mean, you can see 130 and 80. They deplete so much. They're just fine-tuned individuals.
And what is it about the athletes that they have lower levels? Is it that the exercise is promoting depletion, or is there something else they're doing?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. They have think about their muscle mass. They have incredible amounts of muscle. If you have incredible amounts of muscle, that means you have a lot more mitochondria. They have incredible and bigger lung capacity, a lot more mitochondria, a lot more nitric oxide, all these things that are there. They breathe a lot better. Their breathing is perfect. Their determination, they sleep better. They do all the things to make them the Maseratis that we actually should be. So they're doing these kind of things. And so by doing that, you, especially as you get older, you know, I always use LeBron James as an example, and Tom Brady. The reason they're so incredible at 40 years old or near 40 years old is because They're machines. They put everything into their health to last longer. Now, for us, we don't do it as much, but you can think about somebody like LeBron or Tom. 1 extra year is $20 million. Nice. 2 extra years is 40. I mean, that's more money than most of us are going to make in our lifetime. And they're just doing that by keeping the deuterium levels low and keeping all the deuterium depleting systems intact.
When you do determinator testing, what percentage would you say have healthy levels at the beginning?
So, most of the people that send the deuterium level, want the deuterium levels, have chronic illnesses. So it's ours is totally skewed.
We'll speculate then on the general public. If you were to test the average person, would they have high?
So I would say it's just like everything else. The average person in the United States has high deuterium levels. Why do I say that? Because the average person in the United States is overweight, has anxiety. They have those things.
And how long after someone starts to implement a deuterium depletion protocol might they start seeing shifts upon retesting with the determinator test?
Well, there's 2 questions there. One is that you start to see your first question. We usually measure about 5 weeks later. We measure about 5 weeks later, not because it may not have been fast in 2 weeks, but we know by 5 weeks it's done. However, the other question is, when do they start seeing energy rises? A lot of our patients get an increase in energy within 2 days, within 5 days, within a week. Dr. Cooper, who came to us, was the first person who actually started using it on herself before it was anybody else in the United States. She had chronic fatigue just from adrenal, just working her butt off her whole life, just like the average woman, just working too hard and burning both ends of the candle. And she started deuterium depletion just with the water 4 years ago. And within 1 week, her energy measured by clinical evaluation using what's called a breathing instrument that measures resting metabolic rate and exercise metabolic rate went up 70%, right? And that's within 1 week. 40% within just 1 week. And so I always say it's like exercising sitting on your butt, because really what it's doing, it's allowing now, just think those mitochondria now to start working faster and to start making more energy, and your body feels it. And it's just a general thing that people should do. And hopefully we'll talk about how to do it best.
I've heard some people suggest that you can actually analyze deuterium levels on an MRI. How would that be done?
So yes, we have we patented that and invented that about 6 years ago. So yes, so when you look at an MRI, what people didn't realize is that the MRI actually measures protons, right? It measures the weight of something. That's really what it's for. And therefore, since deuterium is twice as heavy as hydrogen, when you take that magnet, right, the magnet will hold both hydrogen and deuterium. An MRI works off magnets, just in case anybody in your crowd doesn't know. And think about it, you turn on this big magnet and it keeps it, then traps the deuterium and hydrogen against it. And then when you let the magnet, as the power goes down, the one that is heaviest, right, releases last. So now, boom, now the hydrogen releases, and then the deuterium. And so then what we realized is from that we could change a couple of things, and we could actually look at those patterns by using MRIs without using contrast, because then we could actually see what the body is doing. And so what's so nice about the MRI there is that we're able to see deuterium not just in target tissues, but every place in your body. So it's like seeing a cloud. So we can see a deuterium in your tumors. And so we can actually say, okay, this is what your deuterium level was at first in this tumor, and this is what your deuterium level is in that tumor now. So when they say your tumor is shrinking, we can only say it's shrinking, but we can say it's less active. And that's the important thing when it comes to tumors. It's not that it's shrinking. You don't care about that in most cases. You don't want it active because you can live with it for the rest of your life. If it's just sitting there, they can operate, move, remove it, but you don't have to take chemo and radiation to kill it then.
You have some other interesting tests, the D-water test, the D-food test, and the D-air test. And what I'm really interested in is you guys have tested lots of different water samples and food samples and air samples and potentially supplement samples that we're going to talk about later. Do you publish the results of any of the commercial waters, foods, or air so that people know which things might be lower in deuterium?
We haven't yet. And the reason we haven't published that is we want to measure enough different ways to make sure that's valid. Because as the trend becomes more, as people understand this more and more, we don't want to be the killer of companies. We want to warn them to tell them where these things are. So we will discuss it with our patients and say what water to drink, not to drink. But essentially, it's really simple. We drink too much water as a society, folks. Stop it. What we want to happen instead is
here I am. Right?
Yeah, well, we all have it. We've been taught this. It's so funny. We all know it. Our grandparents didn't do this. They didn't go around with big bottles of water, drinking gallons. They ate right because you make water from your food. So yes. So hopefully that answers your question.
So let's talk as we move kind of into treatment. Let's talk a little about what deuterium depletion does in the body. So what are some of the positive things that occur when we deplete deuterium levels in our cells? We've talked about mitochondria, increased production of energy, increased metabolism. What are some of the other things that happen that are positive with depleting deuterium?
Okay, so let's talk about some of the simple things. We always talk about detoxing, right? Everybody does their detoxing once a year. Well, if your deuterium levels are low and your energy starts and your energy comes up, your body naturally detoxifies itself. So you get much healthier livers. You start to see all of the liver enzymes start to look better and become more functional. Your insulin test starts to turn around. So you become more responsive to insulin for two reasons. One, the main reason is because you start to get insulin that no longer has deuterium in it and receptors for that insulin that no longer has deuterium. So they now have the right lock and key, the right structure to where they work the way they were meant to work. There's fundamentally, if you're asking a question, which I hate to keep saying because people kind of laugh at it, and I laughed at it too, but simply if you rebuild you every day and you rebuild everything, then as a rebuilt person, you work better. So everything, your enzymes, your muscles, you're able to exercise longer because lactic acid doesn't bother you anymore. So there's nothing. It's not magical that it's deuterium and deuterium depletion. It's just magical because that's just the way the biology works, and that's what I want people to understand. We're not selling them. We're not trying to sell you something, or we're not trying to sell anything anyway. But we're just trying to make sure you understand how it works. And so when you look at your body, it makes everything in your body work more efficiently. That's really what you're doing, and making everything younger and newer. It takes and you can look at your body and you can see your gut turns over every day or less than one day. And after 7 years, you actually rebuild everything in your body, including your DNA. You're a new person every 7 years. So everything is replaced. So if you keep your deuterium levels low, you can literally turn from a person that you were 7 years ago to a new person that is younger and physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially more responsive and younger than you were 7 years ago.
That's why you look so good, right?
Well, that's what I just keep hoping. Yes, I don't look bad for 63. That's all.
Wow. No, you don't. That's amazing. Yeah. So I think what's interesting about this question is that it's not one thing. It's so many things. It's your energy. It's your immune system, your cardiovascular system, your detoxification capacity, your ability to sleep, your neurotransmitters, your anxiety, your depression, all of those things, your potential for significant diseases or even cancers. I mean, it sounds like this deuterium depletion is so foundational to essentially every function in the body. Is there a body function that is not impacted by deuterium?
Not that I know of. I always say it's the ultimate biohack. It really is. It's just a fundamental, but it's simply returning your body to what we always wanted to, returning your body to a healthful state. That's all it is. Just like returning the planet to a healthful state. That's what we're trying to do.
We talked a little bit a minute ago about drinking tap water, and I do tend to drink a lot of filtered water. In the environmental medicine world, we hear the phrase, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So we live in a toxic world and we need to dilute it and flush it out of the body, so to speak. It sounds like drinking more water that has high levels of deuterium makes our deuterium problem worse, correct?
Yes, it does. Yes. And it's two reasons it happens. Not only because you're drinking more, but as you drink more water, there's something, you already know this, but something called ADH, antidiuretic hormone. And that's the hormone that's in our bodies to keep us from urinating so much, right? So as your body makes its own metabolic water, the water it makes is deuterium depleted. It has no deuterium in it. It's pure. It has some. So it goes in there, it makes it inside your cells, and it uses that deuterium depleted water to do what it's supposed to do. Now, what happens? If you drink so much water and your diuretic hormone now goes down, then all that water you're making, you're going to urinate out. So not only are you putting bad stuff in, but you're taking the good stuff out.
Yeah, that's really interesting because in the chronic Lyme disease mold illness population, ADH is generally in these biotoxin illnesses, ADH is very low. People do drink a lot of water and yet pee it all out and are still cellularly dehydrated. Yeah, and so that sounds like exactly what you're talking about here. Is there a difference if we do drink water? Is there any difference between the deuterium levels of, let's say, tap water versus carbon filtered versus distilled versus reverse osmosis, for example? Are there any waters that would be less harmful?
So waters in general, all those purification mechanisms, what they do is remove toxins and metals and things in that water. You can't, there's not one it's the molecular weight between hydrogen and deuterium is nothing. So you can't see it. So the answer to that is no. They all have the same deuterium levels, but I would say there are waters. I would much rather drink a water that's been filtered than drink a water that's not filtered because it has less junk in it and less things that can harm you. But no, and there's a lot of things that are out there that people call things deuterium depleted water, but that's not, when I say deuterium depleted water, I'm talking about therapeutically deuterium depleted. And that means that it's less than 130 parts per million. And it could be as low as 25 or 10 parts per million. So those mechanical things that are out there, even freezing water and using centrifuges, and all, they can deplete deuterium 2 or 3 ppm. But that's not enough to make a difference physically or biologically for a person that has a disease. Or
we're gonna talk a little bit about diet as well in a deuterium depletion approach or strategy, but it seems that the use of these deuterium depleted waters is one of the primary tools for depleting deuterium. There's a lot of different deuterium depleted waters on the market. How are these helping? How much do people potentially need to take? What duration are they taking it for? And then one of the questions that I get a lot is, why are they so costly to make? Most of these deuterium depleted waters are relatively expensive. So talk to us about these waters.
Well, let's talk. So there are different ways to make deuterium depleted water. But the one fundamental and most important way is distillation. Everybody knows what fractional distillation is. But when you make deuterium depleted water, that fractional distillation is done on a tower that's 70 feet tall and also under pressure and at different temperatures. Remember how I said that hydrogen is lighter, so those hydrogens are going to be at the top of this mountain, of this 70% tower, and the deuterium is going to be at the bottom. So what you're doing is distilling that thing thousands of times, thousands of distillations, and freezing and distilling, and that's how you get it. It's a very energy expensive process, and a plant costs about $5 million. Now, a lot of the waters that are coming into the United States now are coming from places that were former nuclear power plants or nuclear weapons plants in Russia and China and Korea. They've just been decommissioned. Since we started talking about deuterium depletion and how it's biologically efficacious, a lot of these companies that are out there are now sending waters or importing waters, or exporting waters to distributors that are selling those waters as a therapeutic. And yes, they are deuterium depleted, and they're therapeutically. And I haven't tested, so they are what they are. They're waters that are deuterium depleted. There are some waters that are out there that have done all the clinical testing and been used in the clinic and in clinical trials. And so those are the ones that we tend to use more than waters that could indeed be cheaper, but that have never shown to be important or work in clinical trials. And as someone who worked for a pharmaceutical company before, I can tell you there's frigging lot of difference between the original drug and generics that are cheaper, even though structurally they're supposed to have exactly the same structure. They're made exactly the same way. But any doctor will tell you that there are huge differences, and a lot of those differences could be the meaning of between life and death, or even better quality of life and having no quality of life.
Plus, if it's a decommissioned nuclear plant, do I necessarily want the potential of radiation exposure in that water? I mean, is that even a concern?
I don't know. Again, I think it's the wild, wild west right now. And I'm happy to see that, because I like to see more people do it. But yeah, I mean, I know when I was in China last year, they wanted to do business with us, and they measured water from Japan, and it had friggin' radioactivity in it. It had it, so it was like, excuse me? Now that water is being sold over in Japan. It's being sold. Yes, it has radiation in it. Does that mean now there are reasons for doing this? Well, all of our water has radiation in it. That's not true. You can remove the radiation from it too. So yes, I am not happy about it, but most of these waters that are out there, they don't test for everything. And even more importantly, they're not independently tested. They're tested by the people that make it, and they're tested by the people that sell it. That is a recipe for disaster.
So you have talked about a specific deuterium depleted water called Preventa. I'm interested in, there's 6 different available waters or parts. Is it parts per million of deuterium? Is that how it's measured? Mm-hmm. So how does one kind of introduce those? How do they work through the different available levels of deuterium depletion in these waters? Do you start with the high one and eventually work all the way down? Or can you give us some thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's really the proof to our putting in what we do at the center. And that's what our work has been the last 20 years. So there are different protocols are needed for different chronic illnesses or different illnesses or wellness. And so what's good for some people are not good for others. For instance, when we look at cancer, we go from the highest ppm to the lowest ppm in a step-down fashion that matches where the person is in their cancer journey. And we read all the clinical reports and we correlate those two together. As a matter of fact, all of our patients are given Fitbit watches so we can see the heart rate variability, we can see how they're sleeping, we can see how they're breathing, we see everything. Then again, that's not the same type, and that protocol is different if a person has aggressive cancer or if they have a non-aggressive cancer. So it's a different protocol. A person that has Lyme disease is not on the same protocol as a person that has cancer or that is wellness. So it uses a different. And even a person that has Lyme disease, depending on their different presentations, we will use different ppms or different waters in different amounts, taken over different periods for that person. So in general, you would say the important thing is to use the right amount for the right thing and for the right period of time. And you can only know that in 2 ways. One, from the work that we've done, and secondly, from this incredible amount of information we get from you doing the determinator to understand where those levels are, even if it's not about the water, where the levels are, for instance, when you go to sleep and wake up. That tells us a lot. Are you depleting at nighttime? That will tell us if you're sleeping or not. Are you depleting after you've exercised? That will tell us if you're breathing or if your muscles are working properly. If you have a heart, believe it or not, even the way you think, anxiety, and we can even see depletion there when people pray. We see differences in some people. And we do all of this, which is important because we have a patient portal. So all the things we do is not to get in a person's way. All that information flows into their patient portal from their Fitbit watch and from the things they upload from their doctors, their clinical reports. It's all seamlessly goes in their portal. And we're able to match up their clinical data with their deuterium data and their other biological data to say this correlates with this. So this level of deuterium correlates with your tumor shrinking, or correlates with you having more energy and less fatigue as a chronic fatigue patient, or a bacterial or antibacterial program working with Lyme disease that didn't work before.
So is there just, I know it's very individualized, but are people usually on these deuterium depleted waters for weeks, months, years? How long is the focus?
No. It's really we usually see that it takes if it's a wellness or optimization, it can be 1 to 2 months. And it's not just water. It's again, water
Right.
is the thing everybody talks about because it's easier, but not easy. It's available. So they can be on there for a detox can be 10 days, for instance. We can detox people in 10 days. And that's just drinking water. And then you can have wellness and optimization. It takes about 30 days. We see a lot of the chronic diseases, or they start to feel, which are not major. We like to call it metabolic dysfunction 1. We start to see that in about 4 months, they're done and they're fixed. And then for the more chronic, if you've been sick for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it takes longer because we can always trick the system with deuterium depleted water. But what we're trying to do is fix the system, which is what takes the time. Cancer, for instance, let me think. So cancer, we go 4 months, anywhere from 2 months to 4 months after you're in remission, so the cancer cells don't come back.
Is there a risk of using a deuterium depleted water that has the lower levels of deuterium, so the smaller numbers? Is there a risk of creating new symptoms? For example, in someone that has high levels of oxalates, if you stop eating oxalates too aggressively, you can actually have this oxalate dumping and leading to other symptoms that are very uncomfortable for the person. So is there a potential risk of going too fast in this process?
Yes, we talked about at the beginning of the show. Absolutely, positively, yes. Because again, your body is a machine, and even giving the machine more power at one time will break that machine. So yes, it should be, the protocol should match the needs. There's very little about that. So if we look at that, there is a risk. Drinking low deuterium depleted water for no reason at all, because really what you're going to do, if you're to drink the water and not change your diet or lifestyle, you'll feel great for a while. I have no doubt about that. But you're setting up an environment of which disease is getting used to that, right? So you can make cancer cells that can grow out in low deuterium water because they're used to that. That's not the way your body is supposed to happen. So the answer is absolutely. And I think that's the danger that we see out there. And just like using red light or using blue light or anything, you don't want to be in the red light all day, even though it's healthy. You want to be in the red light a certain amount of time to get within that zone. It's the same with the deuterium depleted water. You don't want to be in certain zones for a long time if it's not necessary therapeutically.
we've talked about hydrogen. So where do hydrogen tablets, hydrogen water machines, where do they fit into the discussion? Are they creating normal hydrogen or heavy hydrogen? And is the water from a hydrogen water device, is that lower in deuterium than, let's say, the water that went into the machine?
So again, we've measured a lot of them. It's quite possible they deplete deuterium anywhere from maybe 2 or 3 ppm. So if you started with deuterium levels that were 151, you'll end up with one that's 148, okay? So does it deplete deuterium? Well, technically, yes. I always like to call that deuterium reduction. It's not depletion, it's reduction. It's not going. It's an expensive way to get water that's slightly less depleted. But no, in most cases, they only add the same ratio of deuterium the same ratio of hydrogen to deuterium that they put in. Do you get what I mean? So if they use air, it's the same that was in air. They got to get it from someplace. Now, if they use deuterium depleted water, that's great. Then maybe that would work. Matter of fact, that's leading us right now. We're working right now of all the things of seeing how we can even improve not only the cost to make deuterium depletion cheaper, but actually making a different kind of super deuterium depleted water. That's what we're working on now. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about that someday.
Yeah. Given that deuterium depleted water is a high pH water, should it be avoided with food so that we're not increasing the pH of the stomach and negatively impacting our digestive capacity?
So that was interesting. So our deuterium depleted water is alkaline. So I don't know if somebody's may be high, but not so the deuterium depleted water we use is like alkaline water. Mm-hmm. So the pH is about 7.8 to 8.2.
Okay, so it's not real high pH then. It's just a little over neutral. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk then a little bit about the role of diet, because that's so important as well. We did focus a lot on water, but talk to us of the role of diet and reducing deuterium levels. What are some of the higher deuterium foods that we maybe should be avoiding? What are some of the foods that deplete deuterium? And how do the foods that we consume actually create deuterium depleted water inside of our bodies?
Okay, let's start with the first question last. So when we look at carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, it's very simple. Fats have more hydrogens on them, carry more hydrogens per weight than carbohydrates or proteins, right? Carbohydrates carry a certain amount of hydrogens per gram. Proteins carry a certain amount of, about the same amount of hydrogens per gram as carbohydrates. And fat carries about 9 times or 4 times the amount of hydrogens than the other two. In addition, when we look at the body, there are systems of what we use our food for. And our body inside our cells, those mitochondria, use what's called a TCA cycle or Krebs cycle. That's what makes our ATP. That Krebs cycle uses glucose, right? It takes glucose, it takes those proteins, carbohydrates, and it turns them into glucose, and then that goes to your system, right? So what that means is that if we could eat a meal that has higher amounts of fat that's deuterium depleted, grass-fed animals, free-range chickens, wild-caught fish, then that means we're feeding our bodies more hydrogens that have more hydrogens and less deuterium, because there is less deuterium in grass and in bugs and all these things that things naturally eat, okay? So it starts to go into your body and it makes more of this metabolic water because it feeds it more hydrogens. You follow? Now, carbohydrates have 2 problems. Not only do they have less hydrogens per gram, per weight, but most of those hydrogens will be deuterium. So that you eat more, that's when you eat more carbohydrates. That's why you're not fat satiates you, right? Takes less fat to eat, more carbs to eat. So you're living not only more carbs in grams, but more deuterium in grams. So that gets in, breaks your nanomotors, doesn't make ATP. Things that are fat, grass-fed, gets into your body, makes metabolic water, and makes more ATP. So what are the second question? So what foods are high in deuterium and low in deuterium? So when you look at green plants, anything that's green has chloroplasts in them. And chloroplasts are the equivalent of our mitochondria. So those green plants are deuterium depleted, the fibers in them. The water that's in them have, just like our blood, it takes just like we take deuterium out of our organs and put it into the water, which we call blood, it takes the deuterium out of the fiber and puts into the water inside those plants. Okay, so the fiber is deuterium depleted. So now the things that are not deuterium depleted in the plant, it's got to get rid of it someplace. So it gets rid of the water and to its seeds and fruit. Why? Because the seeds and fruits have got to have high levels of deuterium because they're to grow more plants, right? That's what they're for. So we've changed our agriculture to where we've made fruits much more important to what we eat. And so now we grow fruit year round, and we pick fruit from the bottom of the tree all the way up. Well, that's something that's different. It used to be that we would only be able to pick the fruit from the tree on the bottom, and the fruit on the top would go rotten, fall on the ground, and grow more trees. So instead, we're eating year round. Not only are we eating the fruit that's in California or whatever state you're in, you're also being able to go to Ralph's or Kroger's or A&P, and you're able to get fruit that are from around the world and eat fruit 24 hours a day, the entire year, which, again, is not the way we're supposed to live.
So another takeaway for me based on what you were just saying is that juicing is probably not ideal either, because then we're essentially taking out the water and leaving behind the fiber. Did I understand correctly?
It's the funniest point. Thank you. Yeah, you want to juice, but you want to chew your juice. I mean, and this is not a joke. It's the most that we actually go to all the juiceries, get all the fiber and pulp, and feed it to pigs to get deuterium depleted pigs. So it's crazy. So yes, juicing and drinking juice is not the most healthful thing you can do, especially if you have any kind of deuterium-based problems anyway, or any kind of chronic disease. Again, if you can deplete it and you're well and you're optimized, drink your juice because you're depleting it. But if you can't deplete, don't do it.
So tell us a little bit then about how the high amount of fat in our diet, how that makes us less thirsty and why that's a good thing in terms of deuterium depletion. How does the fat consumption help this problem?
So this is great. So here's where, out of the fat you eat, this is what everybody ready? You make 3,000 gallons of water a day from the food you eat. Yes, drop the pin, 3,000 gallons. Now, that 3,000 gallons, those hydrogens and oxygens are used up all day. You're like a nuclear, I called you a Maserati before, I'm going to call you a nuclear-powered submarine now. Because really what you're doing is you're taking those hydrogens and oxygens and you're using it in all these chemical reactions. So you never see this water really leave you. That water is used up, and it's used and used and used. Athletes make more water and that's the interesting part. When we talk about drinking water, that's the reason athletes have to drink a lot of water, because they use all their metabolic water, and that water they're drinking is just used to cool them off. That's all. It never gets inside their cells, unlike us weekend warriors. So if we look at that, we look at fat and ketogenic diets. This is really ketogenic diets. Again, is very therapeutic, and it's working to make people lose a lot of weight and dementia, Alzheimer's. I mean, there's so many things it's good for. It's simply because you're using that fat to make more metabolic water, and it makes it into ketones. And those ketones is what you use to actually break down instead of glucose to make food and to make this metabolic water inside your mitochondria. So that's really what it's doing. And it's very, very, very effective.
If we drink more water by volume than the food we consume, does changing the diet make enough of a difference, or do you have to combine the deuterium depleted water with changes in the diet to see any real shift that's going to lead to clinical changes?
So when we look at in cancer, now I will go with cancer patients. I'm very ardent on. We hit it from a 360-degree approach, which not only includes food but sun, diet. It includes exercise, the right breathing. It really is from a 360 way to do these things. And anything I find as I'll add to the I find and validate clinically, then we will use in the patient. So the answer to your question in short is that the deuterium depleted water is an easy way to get things down fast. And for patients who are sick, especially cancer patients, chronic, I want to get them feeling better and mitigating their cancer as fast as possible. But often with our healthier patients and our wellness patients, I focus on seeing where their deuterium levels are, fixing those little things, and giving them less deuterium depleted water, just so I can get them more energy to fix their systems and getting them going. Because it's amazing how easy it is to prevent a disease or prevent an illness than it is to treat it.
So let's talk a little bit about supplements. You've already kind of turned things on our head a bit from a water perspective, a juicing perspective. Many of us think of supplements as a really good thing, but you actually have stated that supplements, particularly those that are processed or synthetic, can have really high levels of deuterium. So talk to us about how supplements potentially make the problem worse, and how high are the levels of deuterium in some of the supplements that you've looked at?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and I'm going to clean a couple of things up here because people hit me with this question. I did say that, but I'm going to put some more pointed fact to it now. I'm going to be like a president and change my story. So when I speak about supplements do two things. First of all, they do fix you. They are important. So if you don't fix the problem, supplements are a great way to treat the symptoms. So you can add different supplements and make your mitochondria work better for a short time. You can add more supplements and make your gut work better. You can do a lot of things to fix a person's symptoms. Now, the problem with that, when we go to cancer first, with cancer, unlike all your other diseases, cancer has two different metabolisms going on in it. It has a metabolism of the normal cells and a metabolism of the cancer cells, which are completely different. The approach that we're using for the deuterium depletion on all people is that we're trying to make their normal cells healthier and return those normal cells to a condition to where they are no longer going to become cancer cells. And if they are cancer cells, they're going to get weak and die because our deuterium depletion will make a cancer cell weaker. It makes a normal cell stronger. So some of those things it does, it allows now for your body to be able to maintain and absorb nutrients better. So your vitamin D levels, because we're going to have you go outside, are higher. Your magnesiums are high. Your zinc is higher because your body's not wasting any of these things anymore. You're at optimized, again, Maserati, or you're that nuclear sub now. Those cancer cells, on the other hand, are sick. And so when you keep taking those supplements, you're not making the normal cells better. You're making the sick cells stronger. That's why I say we stay away from supplements when we have cancer. And that's the reason I'm always harping, no, no, no. Why? Because not only are you making them stronger, but most of the supplements people take are made in a manufacturing, they're just like processed foods, and they're made with water on them. So they're made with regular water. So it means it's made with high levels of deuterium, just like the water you drink have higher levels of deuterium. And when when we're using this therapeutically, we want to make sure that we have low levels, because it's all about what goes in that counts. Okay, so that's when we talk. Now, when we talk about other diseases like chronic illnesses, then we are a little it's different. And also, I want to also say, when we think about herbs, on the other hand, we prefer natural herbs that are made out of plants, especially if they're made out of, even plants are different, especially made out of plants that have used natural rainwater instead of using water that's irrigation water, because rainwater lower the deuterium than water that's usually from a river. So that's important. So we're a very believer in herbal products when we use it versus using supplements. We're also a great believer, if it's going to be, because we think that has less deuterium, although we will measure all of them. We measure supplements and herbs all the time. Now, when we talk about chronic illnesses, it's a little bit different. What I find there in this case is just the massive amounts of supplements people take in a lot of these conditions. And it does help them, but it raises their deuterium levels. So they're putting as much deuterium in their system, twice more than they're eating with their regular food. So that's the biggest problem. You're just putting all this deuterium dump into you. So you're making the fundamental basic problem work, but you're doing a great job fixing the symptoms.
Yeah, and if I look at a supplement, let's say, does the quantity or volume matter? So if I drink this glass of water that's maybe 150 parts deuterium, does that mean that I would have to quantity-wise, have the same amount of capsules or tablets that were 150 parts deuterium to have the same negating effect? Or does even a few small tablets or capsules make a significant difference, as in the amount that we might see from drinking water or consuming 3 pounds of food?
Yeah, that's a good part. And one of the tools we're building on our site is where you'll put it in and it'll tell your total deuterium exposure for that day. So that's a very, very good question. And the answer is yes, that when you look at things that are not foods, right, that are like waters, and they don't go through the same system. So water, usually the supplements and the water are equivalent, right, because they're not going through the TCA cycle. So the amount of deuterium you put in, whether it's from whatever source is, and your water, they're going over here into this pool. The food, on the other hand, when you eat food, what's going to happen is that food and the hydrogen from that food and from those things that go through what your body does to use the nutrition, that goes your mitochondria and breaks your mitochondria, which is much more important. The way water works is very interesting. It's not that the water gets to your mitochondria to break it, not the water that, when you hold up your glass again, it's not the water inside that glass that matters. What happens is those hydrogens get into your body, and when your body strips the hydrogens off your food, it replaces the hydrogens back on your food when it's in the mitochondria. So if your deuterium levels are lower, it's going to replace the hydrogens on that food with lower amounts of deuterium. If you drink a lot of water and your deuterium levels are higher on the outside, when it strips it off on the outside and goes inside your cells, and you don't have lower amounts of deuterium inside your cells, it's going to put that higher levels of deuterium on your cells, right? So you could actually have a situation to where you're screwing things up by putting bad hydrogens on good food. How about that?
Wow, that's interesting. Are there any companies that you know of that actually promote themselves as having low deuterium supplements?
No, but we're working with several companies now. One of the things the Center for Deuterium Depletion does, besides all the clinical leadership and promotion that we do for the field of deuterium depletion, we also are acting as a source, an independent source, to measure deuterium in foods for commercial companies and giving them ways to actually make better foods, whether that be why you don't use glyphosates, how these things work. For instance, when you look at pesticides and Roundup and things like that, the way they work is those pesticides go in and they break the ability of the pests it breaks their ability to make energy by killing their TCA cycle. Now, that sounds great. It kills those bugs. But now if you eat that food and it still has the pesticides on it, it breaks your mitochondria the same way as it broke the bug. So, and that's why you see so many people ending up with cancer with glyphosate, who have been glyphosate challenged. Because again, it's the same thing. You break your mitochondria, and as you break more mitochondria and there's less mitochondria in that particular cell, that cell gives rise to a cancer.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know you mentioned in cancer that certain supplements may actually make the cancer cells stronger. I know in the chronic Lyme disease, chronic infection realm, Dr. Klinghart's always talked about parasites and how certain supplements like B vitamins may actually do more for the parasites in us than they actually do for us, and how when we're doing anti-parasitic protocols, we may need to pause on some of those things that are feeding or strengthening the parasites.
Yes, I talked to Dr. Klinghardt. He's using deuterium depleted water in some of our protocols and combining it with what he does, because that's the key, is using the doctor's intelligence and the things they've been doing forever. We simply make it better. It's almost like the BSAF thing, right? We don't do anything. We just make everybody else's things better. And so that's exactly it.
Are there any supplements that can help reduce deuterium? You talked about chloroplast, for example. So can we get chloroplast from supplements like chlorella?
Yes. So chlorella is very good. Chlorella is great. There's two things. It's always interesting. So all these things that you have lower deuterium in them. So like chloroplast and red peppers, all these things we think of being curcumin, all these things we think of being very good for us therapeutically, they all have lower deuterium levels. And so by having lower deuterium levels, then that may be what it's doing. So if you think about how something works, you have, this is going to bind to receptor, and on that when that ligand binds to the receptor of that cell to make it work, it's able to deliver to it lower amounts of deuterium, these hydrogens, that then power it to do what it was supposed to do. So it's a great delivery system. So,
are there other supplements besides chlorella that also can be helpful in depleting deuterium?
Yes, there's different mushrooms. There are, we're working on some of them now. Again, when you think about it, anything, I would say any supplement that can deliver mostly hydrogens and no deuterium is going to be something that's going to help, right? If, for instance, you can take, here's a good example. If we can take a supplement that will make us sleep better and get more deep and REM sleep, even if it had deuterium on it, even if it did, it would be a deuterium depleting, because that's when you deplete deuterium. Right? So if you had better REM and deep sleep, we can measure the differences, the cost and benefit. And that's what we do. The cost and benefit of taking this supplement to get this thing fixed. Or, for instance, if I can take something that's going to fix my gut, that supplement that I take may have more deuterium on it, but my gut is the biggest thing that removes deuterium from my body. So if it makes my gut stronger and it allows my gut to deplete deuterium better, I'm willing to give a patient a supplement that has higher deuterium levels, because the benefit outweigh the cost.
You're having way too much fun over here, I can tell.
No, you're acting, these are great questions, because people usually don't allow me to give the nuances of of how this works.
Yeah, this is so
really
fun.
Yeah, this is really science.
So let's talk about a few other tools as we start wrapping up. So I've read, and we've talked a little about the role of photobiomodulation and depleting deuterium in the body. I personally use red light therapy with the Juve and some other tools fairly regularly. So can you tell us a little about how light therapy can help removing deuterium? How is it actually working? And it sounds like it's not a sole deuterium depletion tool in a protocol, but it's one of many things that we might be doing. So tell us a little about how red light therapy potentially reduces deuterium.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is very interesting. I'm very close to Juve. That's shout out to Juve, my peeps. I love the whole family.
Nice.
But when you look at this again, I want to say this again. We're a deuterium depletion biomodulation is what we do. They do photobiomodulation. What does that mean? That means we want to be able to predictively change a biological system to get an outcome that we can predict. So what we find nice is that when you look at wavelengths, you actually eat light, you eat sound, you eat food. And if people start understanding, just like you eat feelings and you eat emotions, and those go in and they feed your body. And what you feed your body, that determines if you're going to be healthy or if you're going to be, say it again, diseased? Diseased. I'm going to use that. It's going to feed your body and feed the good parts and bad parts. Photobiomodulation and red light do several things. One of the important things it does, different wavelengths do different things. So one wavelength or a group of wavelengths actually power the immune system. And they power the immune system by looking at the cytochromes and on the electron transport system that go with the Krebs cycle. It powers the cytochromes on that. So that energy hits that cytochrome, makes it more effective, and it charges these cells up. Imagine, it just now makes electrons go faster, faster, faster. Feed me, feed me, feed me. It feeds them. It's like that, feed me Seymour, right? Just, you keep feeding these things till it keeps going and makes the mitochondria work better, work faster, and make more energy. Another wavelength, we can switch a wavelength, and it is concerned with water. And what that will do, it makes water molecules do different things. And so that water molecules combined with the other now allows the mitochondria not only to work better, but the fluid around it to be less viscous. And by being less viscous, that again allows the mitochondria to work faster. But what does that mean? That means if heavier elements like deuterium is floating around there, that makes it thick, like a syrup, right? Think of syrup, it's just thicker stuff in it. If we were to place the thicker stuff, a sugar with a smaller sugar, that syrup would be less viscous. It would still be syrup, it would still taste the same, but it would be less viscous. In this case, that syrup around the mitochondria and the motors becomes thinner from me hitting it with the light and hitting with the other light to make now the electrons pass down to the mitochondria. So now the mitochondria are working perfectly in suit. This is important because this is the thing that powers our immune system, right? So this immune system now has the power, these floating mitochondria, like I was saying. So when you're standing in front of your Juve light, it can hit those floating mitochondria, and it takes that information from your skin and from the top of your body, and it takes it all over your body. It goes every place. They go every place, and they deliver information to it. So that's the reason that we now take combination of light and understanding how light works and sound works with how water works and make the perfect therapy. So we're so happy that we're working with different groups to find out, again, how the deuterium depleted biomodulation works with them.
Yeah, this is really exciting stuff. You mentioned that we can acquire deuterium from the atmosphere, from the air we're breathing. Is there any role for air filtration in a home to minimize deuterium? Do filters filter out any of that deuterium?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is yes. Here's what we do. In a lot of cases, for instance, just in the air that we breathe in the environment, right? There is humidity in this room. That humidity has water in it. That's what humidity is. So if you take the humidity out of the room, you're taking the deuterium out of the room. So the answer is absolutely yes. We actually put plants in rooms like mother's tongues and I can't remember the name, calla lilies and a lot of mosses. They actually put more oxygen in the air at night. And they put oxygen in the air at night, and they scrub CO2 out of the air. And people don't know that. So you can actually biologically make your room more healthy. So yes, we indeed, you can do that as far as taking the humidity out. There's not a scrubber at this time that, again, can remove deuterium versus hydrogen because, again, we're talking about A neutron. I know it's hard when people think of the smallest thing you can imagine, and then multiply it by a billion times. That's what the difference.
So an air filter like we might be using to minimize mold or mycotoxins or something in the environment, that's not so much going to help the deuterium issue. It's more about dehumidifiers that are pulling the water out of the atmosphere, out of the room air, for example. That's what's really helping from a deuterium perspective.
Yes, from the deuterium perspective, stopping mold is important, but all those things are important. But yes, if you really wanted to do it, you would take the deuterium out of the air. But the truth is, we can we do that for some. Now, the dry air hurts a lot of people, but mostly what we can do is instead fix their system to where they can deplete it instead. Because you breathe about 1.5 gallons of water in every night.
Do people that live in environments that have much higher humidity, are they, by nature of that higher level of humidity in the air, are they higher deuterium?
Well, the answer is yes. So if we look at places high in the mountains, like the Himalayas or Colorado or high places in Utah, Salt Lake City, they're the healthiest places on earth. They advertise they're healthy. They're healthy. Oh, I hear the angels singing. It's just amazing how much healthier. And those terrible Californians, the reason our cancer high are higher because we're so liberal, or in the South, they're high because they're so dumb. This is the reason it happens. Well, that's not. It has nothing to do with that. It's simply the deuterium levels are lower at the top of a mountain. That makes you healthier because the deuterium you're breathing in, the deuterium you're eating, everything is lower there. You're going to be healthier. And why is it higher in other places? Because the deuterium levels in California and San Francisco are higher. So the cancer rate is higher in San Francisco. In the South, Mississippi and Arkansas, the deuterium levels are high. Now, other health style things we do is smoking and different things, and the foods we eat adds to it. But you already have a strike against you by where you live. Now, let me also say that it's not important where you live too, because your body adjusts to where you live if you'll allow it to. Right? You can have a proper sunshine, the proper diet, and everything to be as healthy in Mississippi as you are at the top of a mountain, Nevada or Utah, or even the Himalayas.
So we're talking about the effect of breathing certain environments that have higher humidity. Let's talk about how breathing exercises can help with removing deuterium. Are there specific types of breathing exercises? I read something about even a mask that can be worn while you're breathing to help accelerate your ability to excrete or to deplete deuterium.
Yes, that's it. So when you think about this, we all know that oxygen plus the hydrogens makes H2O, water. So where do you get that oxygen from? You get oxygen from your tissues and from when you're breathing in, right? You're breathing in things. So the way deuterium is depleted in the body is oxygen will bind to hydrogen, but it will bind to deuterium first. When I told about those isotopic principles. So oxygen binds to deuterium more readily, and once it binds it, it holds on to it till you deplete it. That's the whole idea with oxygen. And again, when you die, as everybody knows, you can live weeks without food. I went 72 days without eating, so I know food's not that important. You can go 8 to 9 days without drinking. You can only go 2.5 minutes without breathing. Because if you don't breathe, that oxygen can't come in, remove the deuterium, so your nanomotors won't get broken. If there's no oxygen, your nanomotors, remember that hydrogen we talked about, like that electric turbine stops turning. Once your nanomotors stop turning, you're dead. You can't restart nanomotors. When you see them go with the clear and they hit you with the electric packs, that person's still alive. You can't bring a dead person. You can't get the nanomotors to start back. So clinical death is really the stopping of the nanomotors, not the stopping of brain activity. It's the stopping of your nanomotors. So is there a mask or something that people can wear to? Yes. So we teach a lot of breathing techniques, and what we call that is if the listeners try to hold their breath once they exhale, and they want to hold it till they feel till they're comfortable. And once they are uncomfortable, feel any discomfort, they breathe. The time that it took to do that is called a controlled pause. The controlled pause of a healthy individual should be 45 to 60 seconds. And I dare say everybody's going to try this, and they're going to be shocked that they can't hold their breath that long. Again, on exhale, they can't do it. So that means there's not enough oxygen in your tissue. And if there's no oxygen in your tissue, that means they can't fight cancer and they can't remove deuterium. So what we do is we give techniques to show people how to breathe properly so their tissues become more oxygenated. And one of the things we use is a mask. And that mask we use by the person is able to then, with this mask on their face, when they rebreathe using our exercises, they're going to rebreathe in a little piece of carbon dioxide. And when that carbon dioxide gets into your blood, what it does, it tells your hemoglobin, which carries your oxygen, to release that oxygen to your tissues. Now, people may hear this and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't I just breathe faster? Well, that's exactly what happens with hyperventilation. When you hyperventilate, you take in more oxygen. And it's counterintuitive, but that oxygen goes into your blood. And what it tells your hemoglobin is, oh my God, I've got too much oxygen. Let's hold on to this oxygen. And that oxygen is not released to your tissue. That's why you get dizzy and you black out.
Wow. Gosh, I'm learning so many cool things here. So as we start wrapping up, a couple of last questions for you. I think one important question is, once someone depletes their deuterium, gets to a good level with the determinator testing, they maybe don't go back to the same diet they were on before. They've learned some things, but they're not on a focused deuterium depleted protocol. Will their levels rise over time? Is there a maintenance phase? Or once everything's working more efficiently again, will it continue to operate in that manner without additional focus?
Well, here's the beautiful thing about what we do. Again, your deuterium levels are your natural ability to deplete deuterium is going to change as you get older. But what we're able to do is to look at where you are, to measure what the differences is between you, to fix all those things, and then you can then go out and live your life and know that you're depleting. So yes, indeed, we fix that person, and then they go along their merry way. But what we do is say once a year, they go on a deep deuterium depletion dive. So that deep deuterium depletion dive is to fix their system again and to rid their cells of any cancer cells. So for 30 days a year, we say do deuterium depletion once a year for 30 days, and it's probably going to add 10 to 15 years to your life and give you quality of life. Why? Because you cleared out the cancer cells, you cleared out the chronic fatigue, you've cleared out all these things that were going to lead to you becoming diseased. Like that. And even when we look at, I think it's amazing, when we look at right now at the COVID epidemic or pandemic that we're going through, all these techniques are very important for the COVID, for COVID, because as you said, what does it do? It stops viruses and parasites. It makes it more difficult for them to grow. It allows you to breathe better. So all those problems with the lungs, it takes away. Red light, we're writing a paper right now where red light is antiviral. Not only do some wavelengths of red light kill actually the COVID virus by rupturing the cell membrane on it, but their membrane, by rupturing their membrane. So certain red lights kill that. So you keep doing your red light because it probably has an effect. And more importantly, it increases your immune system. So your immune system's working better. So all of the things we do now that we've been doing for 20 and 30 years for deuterium depletion actually empowers you and makes you stronger and makes you able to fight any pandemic that comes along, whether it be cancer or COVID or Lyme's or obesity or someone yelling at you and making you feel bad about yourself all the time.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see those people that are significantly impacted by COVID and end up on a ventilator and whatnot. It'd be interesting to correlate that to their deuterium levels as compared to those that recover. I'm sure you guys are probably exploring that.
Yeah, we're doing that right now. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're working with a couple of governments on is a formula that is a deuterium depletion formula, but it also stops all of the. It was used to use we used it for it's been proven to work for AIDS, but we changed it so not only does it work for AIDS, but it works on COVID by going at all the things COVID's supposed to do. So it stops the cytokine storm. It allows you to breathe better. It stops the replication of the virus once it's inside a cell. These are all the things that we've been doing for years. So we love our cancer patients because they've been calling me all the time and going, my God, now everybody knows how we feel because this is what they go through every day, right? And this is what a Lyme patient goes through every day.
Yep.
So the rest of the world is just understanding how it feels, how the rest of the world, how we feel who have metabolic dysfunction. It's the same thing.
So this IT that you referred to that was helpful in AIDS and now helpful potentially in COVID, how will we ultimately learn more about that? Is that going to be a supplement or a variation of the water, or what is it?
Well, it's a combination of water, but it'll be on our site, and I'll be making an announcement this week. We're taking it to the FDA so they can do clinical trials, but we're getting it to people already. A lot of our patients are on it. We're provided the frontline. A lot of our frontline doctors are getting it. We provide it to them free because what they're doing for us is amazing, and we don't want them to get sick. My brother's an emergency nurse in one of the larger hospitals in LA, so I know what he's going through. So this is a C60-based product, which is a carbon nanoparticle, but we have fixed that a lipofullerene, but it has a lot of things on it that's really guided for this COVID bug. And it's been made, we've used in quite a few patients. And what we see, now we can't make no claims. All we can do is say, this is what the science says. But we have used in quite a few patients that have gone into respiratory arrest, and they're all with us today because what it does, it's not a preventative. It's only vaccines will do this. And red light, or making your innate immune system will do this. What it does instead, it stops everything that the COVID does to actually destroy your health and then kill you. So it stops all that part. So as soon as somebody has breathing difficulties, we say, call us, we'll get this to you, and you take it, and that will keep you from going the next step into the hospital or you have to be on a ventilator.
Beautiful. I'll watch for that information and happy to share that with my audience as well once it's available.
Fantastic.
The last question that I ask is the same for every guest, and that's, what are some of the key things that you do on a daily basis in support of your own health?
Yeah. So it's always interesting. I always say, practice what I preach, not what I do. I must admit, I could even be better. I could be better. But I try everything. You try to live a deuterium depleted life. And that includes, again, being emotionally happy and showing gratitude for what you do. I think mental is something that's looking, one of the markers we use for health is how much do you look toward the future and what the future will bring to you versus how much you relish the past. And it seems that those people that look toward the future and relish those things that are coming in the future do clinically better than those people that hang on to the past. It's very interesting. And also, how much do you like stress? People always think stress is a bad thing. Stress is not a bad thing. Stress is a good thing if you use it to its fullest capacity. And so I love stress. So that's one of the things I keep myself under stress, and it makes me happy and young. So diet is important. I eat a relatively deuterium depleted diet, but because I'm able to deplete, you could see, if you see me in the streets someday eating potato chips and candy, don't be surprised, because you know what? I can do that. My body will deplete deuterium. So we're not trying to shame anybody to anything. We're trying to give you the choices to make for you. I always say, are the best thing I can do. If I can die tomorrow, if I can deliver the ability to make cancer a choice, then I've done everything that I want to do. And that's where we are. I can give you the information, and I can even take that same information and either do the things that are necessary or not. But at the end of the day, I'm empowered to make those decisions.
Beautiful. This has been such a fun conversation. You took a few of the things that I've held on to, like drinking water and juicing, some of those things, and kind of given us some new ways to look at things, supplements, a lot of things that you've kind of upended for us and given us some challenging new ways of looking at things. I've had a super fun time with this conversation. I'm excited to continue to learn more about this topic and the things that you're working on. Just want to thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us, to share with us, to help minimize the struggle that everyone on this planet is going through, and just honor you for your work and all that you do.
Well, Scott, I want to back at you. I mean, I've listened to your podcast. I really appreciate it. We are one heart, and we're on the same mission to help people. And again, if anybody needs help, please just call our 800 number, or more importantly, go to ddcenters.com and set up a free 10-minute call. Love to talk to you, love to get you healthy, and to keep cancer away from you, help you with your Lyme disease, just to give you a better quality of life. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Q. Appreciate it very much. Be well.
Be well.
To learn more about today's guest, visit ddcenters.com. That's DD as in Deuterium Depletion, centers.com. ddcenters.com. Thanks for your interest in today's show. If you'd like to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, you can find me there as Better Health Guy. To support the show, please visit betterhealthguy.com/donate. If you'd like to be added to my newsletter, visit betterhealthguy.com/newsletters. And this and other shows can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Thanks for listening to this Better Health Guy blogcast with Scott, your Better Health Guy. To check out additional shows and learn more about Scott's personal journey to better health, please visit betterhealthguy.com.